The mercenary ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Horizon colony's atmosphere. Inside the command center, 6 different alien species gathered around the tactical display. Their target was a small human settlement, supposedly an easy mark for their well-equipped force. Red, the mission commander, flexed his upper appendages in anticipation. His crystalline body structure glittered under the ship's lights as he studied the colony layout. This would be a simple raid. Get in, grab the resources, maybe take some slaves, and leave before any real resistance could form. After all, what could a bunch of primitive Deathworlders do against their advanced technology? All units, prepare for deployment. Red commanded through the ship's communication system. Remember, these are just humans. Their weapons are primitive, and their bodies are fragile. This should be an easy mission. The dropships descended through the upper atmosphere, their heat shields glowing as friction built up around them. The mercenary force consisted of 200 elite troops, each chosen for their combat experience and equipped with the latest battlefield technology. Their armor could stop most energy weapons, and their sensors could detect life forms through walls. The first sign that something was wrong came when the colony's defense batteries opened fire. The mercenaries had expected simple projectile weapons. Instead, magnetically accelerated rounds punched through 3 dropships, sending them spinning into the ground below. Red watched in disbelief as 40 of his best troops disappeared in balls of fire. "Impossible," he hissed, his crystalline form vibrating with anger. Their intelligence said they only had basic defenses. The remaining dropships scattered, taking evasive action as they approached their landing zones. On the ground, Captain Stone of the Colonial Defense Force watched through his binoculars. His weathered face showed no emotion as he keyed his radio. "All units, execute Defense Plan Delta. Let's show these pirates what happens when you raid a human colony." The mercenaries landed in 3 groups, expecting to face panicked civilians. Instead, they found empty streets and buildings. Their sensors showed life signs, but they were scattered and unclear. The aliens advanced cautiously, their confidence already shaken by the loss of their dropships. The first group entered what appeared to be a storage facility. Their leader, a tall insectoid named Green, clicked his mandibles nervously. The building seemed abandoned, but something felt wrong. His sensor suite was showing strange readings, heat signatures that appeared and disappeared randomly. A loud clang echoed through the facility. The mercenaries spun around, weapons raised. Nothing. Then another sound, from a different direction. And another. "It's a trap," Green screamed, but it was too late. The humans had filled the building with sonic disruptors, calibrated to the exact frequencies that would cause maximum discomfort to the alien species. What was merely annoying to humans was agonizing to the mercenaries' enhanced senses. Their advanced armor, designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, did nothing against the sound waves. Outside, more mercenary teams were discovering the humans didn't fight like any species they'd encountered before. Snipers hidden in impossible positions took careful shots at exposed joints in the aliens' armor. Small drones dropped EMP charges that fried sensitive equipment. And somehow, the humans were moving between buildings without being detected. Red watched in horror as his tactical display showed more and more units going dark. He had lost contact with almost a quarter of his force in less than an hour. His troops reported that the humans were using the environment against them. Smoke, noise, even the colony's industrial chemicals. "These aren't primitives," he muttered, watching another squad marker disappear from his display. "They're predators." In his command post, Captain Stone allowed himself a small smile as reports came in. The aliens had expected easy prey and found themselves facing an enemy that had evolved on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. An enemy that had learned to fight and survive in conditions that would kill most species. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "long-range sensors show multiple ships entering the system. They're ours. Looks like Earth got our distress signal." Stone nodded, watching the alien dropships trying to regroup. "Send word to all units. Hold position and maintain pressure. Help is coming. He paused, looking at the tactical display showing the scattered alien forces. And someone tell these mercenaries that this is just the Colonial Defense Force. Wait until they meet our special forces. The emergency beacon pulsed through space, its signal reaching Earth's military command within hours of the attack. Inside the Strategic Response Center, Admiral White studied the holographic display showing the situation at Horizon Colony. His aged face reflected the soft blue light as he turned to his staff. "Get me the Phantoms," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command experience. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what calling in the Phantoms meant. Things were about to get serious. Commander Hayes stood in the briefing room of the Special Forces carrier Nightshade, studying the mission data with his team. The Phantoms were Earth's elite special operations unit, composed of operators who had proven themselves exceptional even by human standards. Their existence was classified, their missions never officially acknowledged. "The colony's holding," Hayes said, pointing to the tactical display. "Captain Stone and his people have bloodied the mercenaries' nose pretty good, but they can't hold forever." He looked at his team. 12 operators, each chosen for their unique skills and incredible endurance. Intel shows 6 different alien species in the mercenary force, the intelligence officer reported. They're using top-line gear, but they're not prepared for extended combat against human forces. Most of them come from low-gravity worlds with stable environments. They've never faced anything like us. The team reviewed their equipment, specialized combat suits designed to enhance rather than replace human capabilities. Unlike the aliens' bulky armor, these suits were lightweight and focused on stealth. They didn't need heavy environmental protection. Humans could already survive conditions that would kill most alien species. Back at the colony, Red watched his forces trying to regroup. The initial attack had cost him nearly 60 troops, and the humans showed no signs of weakening. His remaining forces had taken refuge in a defensive position, using their ship shields to protect against the colonists' surprisingly effective attacks. "Status report," he demanded, his crystalline form clouded with stress patterns. "Bad, Commander," his second-in-command replied. "We've lost contact with 3 more squads. The humans are using the colony's industrial sector as a killing ground. They've turned the entire infrastructure against us. And our sensors." He paused, mandibles clicking in frustration. "They're useless. The humans are using the electromagnetic interference from the planet's unusual magnetic field to hide their movements." Red studied the tactical display, trying to understand how a simple raid had gone so wrong. His forces had superior technology, better weapons, and centuries of combined combat experience. Yet these humans, these supposedly primitive Deathworlders, were making his elite mercenaries look like rookies. The Nightshade dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to the mercenary sensors. Commander Hayes and his team made final preparations in the drop bay. Each operator checked their gear one last time: weapons, tactical systems, and the minimal environmental protection they needed. "Remember," Hayes said as they prepared for deployment, "these aliens think technology makes them superior. They don't understand what it means to evolve on a death world. They don't know what it means to be human." He looked at each team member, seeing the quiet confidence in their eyes. "Let's show them." Captain Stone received the encrypted message and allowed himself a grim smile. He keyed his comm unit, connecting to all colonial defense units. "All units, maintain pressure on the enemy positions. We have reinforcements incoming." He paused, looking at the stormy sky above the colony. "The Phantoms are coming." In his fortified position, Red felt a sudden chill. His sensors were picking up a massive electromagnetic storm approaching the colony, the kind of weather that would ground most combat forces. But somehow, he knew the humans wouldn't be stopped by a mere storm. In fact, they were probably counting on it. The real battle was about to begin. The storm raged across Horizon Colony's sky, painting everything in shades of purple and black. Lightning danced between the clouds, and rain fell in sheets of stinging droplets. The alien mercenaries had pulled back all their patrols. Their environmental sensors couldn't function in these conditions, and the acidic rain was starting to corrode their expensive armor. High above the storm, the Phantoms prepared for their drop. Commander Hayes checked his tactical display one last time. The storm would provide perfect cover for their insertion, and the electrical interference would blind the aliens' detection systems. What the mercenaries considered impossible conditions was exactly what the Phantoms trained for. "Remember," Hayes said over the team channel, "these aliens have never faced Deathworlders in full combat. Let's keep it quiet and clean." His team responded with clicks on their comms. They were ready. The drop bay doors opened, revealing the chaos below. The Phantoms stepped out into nothing, their bodies streamlined against the howling wind. No chutes deployed yet. They were doing a halo drop from the edge of space. The team fell through layers of clouds, their bodies perfectly controlled despite the brutal conditions. In his command center, Red watched his sensor screens flicker and die. The storm was unlike anything in his combat experience. His troops huddled in their fortified positions, their morale dropping with each crash of thunder. "Commander," one of his officers called out, "we're detecting something strange. Multiple objects falling through the upper atmosphere, but they're too small to be dropships." Red moved to the screen, his crystalline form reflecting the lightning flashes. "Show me," he demanded. But before the officer could respond, the screen went completely dark. The storm had knocked out their last working sensors. The Phantoms split into 3 teams as they approached the ground, each heading for predetermined targets. Their tactical systems, designed to work with human senses rather than replace them, functioned perfectly in the storm. They could see the heat signatures of the alien positions, hear the sound of their equipment over the thunder, and smelled the distinct odors of different alien species. The first team landed silently on the roof of what had been the colony's main storage facility. 2 mercenary squads had set up a command post inside, thinking the building's thick walls would protect them. They didn't realize that humans had designed these buildings to withstand far worse than a mere storm. Hayes and his team moved like shadows through the rain. Their boots, designed to work with human balance and agility, found perfect purchase on the slick surfaces. The acid rain that was eating through alien armor just slid off their suits. They had trained in conditions far worse than this. The first alien sentry died without a sound. One of the Phantoms simply appeared behind him, applied pressure to specific points, and the alien's crystalline form shattered silently. The team moved inside through a maintenance hatch that the mercenaries hadn't even noticed. Inside, the aliens had set up impressive defensive positions if they had been fighting a conventional force. But the Phantoms weren't conventional. They moved through maintenance ducts that the aliens considered too small for any warrior to use, climbed along pipes that seemed too weak to hold weight, and appeared in spaces that should have been inaccessible. The first squad of mercenaries died without firing a shot. The Phantoms moved through their position like ghosts, each kill silent and efficient. The aliens' advanced armor proved useless against attacks that targeted joint weaknesses and environmental seals. The second squad realized something was wrong when their communications went dead. By then, it was too late. They never saw the humans. They just felt the effects of their attacks. Weapons failed, armor seals broke, and alien bodies fell. In his command center, Red received a garbled transmission from the storage facility. All he heard was a few seconds of static, then something that chilled his crystalline form. The sound of quiet, controlled human breathing, followed by silence. The storm raged on, and under its cover, the Phantoms continued their work. The legend of human special forces was about to be born in blood and silence. The storm passed, but the real nightmare was just beginning. Horizon Colony's night cycle lasted 36 standard hours, and darkness fell like a heavy blanket over the battlefield. The alien mercenaries switched to their night vision systems, clustering together in defensive positions. They had lost contact with 4 more outposts during the storm, and no one had seen what happened to the troops stationed there. Red stood in his command center, reviewing the damage reports. His crystalline form vibrated with growing fear as he studied the patterns. The attacks weren't random. They were systematic, professional, and executed with terrifying precision. Each lost physician had been taken without a single shot fired, without a single alarm raised. Commander, his second-in-command approached, mandibles clicking nervously. The troops are talking. They say humans can see in the dark without equipment. They say humans don't need sleep like normal species. Red dismissed these as rumors, but doubt crept into his mind. Their intelligence had classified humans as primitive Deathworlders, but everything they'd seen suggested something far more dangerous. These weren't the actions of primitives. These were the tactics of apex predators. In the darkness, Hayes and his phantoms moved silently between buildings. Their eyes, adapted through millions of years of evolution to hunt in low light, needed only minimal enhancement to see clearly. Unlike the aliens' bulky night vision gear, their equipment simply improved what humans could already do naturally. Team 2, report. Hayes whispered into his comm. The response came back equally quiet. 3 more positions mapped. They're grouping together. They're scared. Hayes smiled. Fear was a weapon, and the aliens were learning why humans had survived on a world that should have killed them. The phantoms didn't just attack. They haunted their enemies, using the psychological pressure of unseen threats to break their will. An alien sentry stood at his post, 4 eyes scanning the darkness. His species had evolved on a bright world with 3 suns. Darkness itself was unnatural to him. A soft sound made him turn, weapon raised. Nothing. Another sound from a different direction. His hand shook as he spun around. Still nothing. The sentry never saw the human that dropped from above. One moment he was searching the darkness. The next he was unconscious. The phantom dragged him away without a sound, leaving only empty space where a guard should have been. Red received the reports throughout the night. Sentries disappeared. Equipment failed mysteriously. Supply cages vanished. And always, there were the sounds. Quiet footsteps that came from impossible directions, whispered breaths in the darkness, the soft scratch of movement in supposedly secure areas. How long have they been in our perimeter? He demanded, reviewing another missing patrol report. His officers had no answer. The humans moved through their defenses as if the barriers didn't exist, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The worst part was the waiting. The mercenaries knew the humans were out there, watching. Some troops swore they could feel eyes on them in the darkness. Others reported seeing shadows move against the night sky, only to find nothing when they looked closer. Hours stretched into days. The aliens, unused to such long periods of darkness, struggled to maintain alertness. Their bodies demanded rest, but rest meant vulnerability. The humans, meanwhile, showed no signs of fatigue. They maintained constant pressure, never allowing the mercenaries to relax. In a secured bunker, 2 alien soldiers monitored their sensor screens. One turned to get a stimulant pack, their 4th in as many hours. When he looked back, his companion was gone. No alarm, no sign of struggle, just empty space and a lingering sense of dread. They're not fighting us, Red realized, watching another position go dark on his tactical display. They're hunting us. In the darkness outside, Hayes and his team prepared for another infiltration. The aliens were learning a lesson that every predator on Earth knew. The most dangerous hunters were the ones you never saw coming. 4 days had passed since the storm, and the alien mercenary force was crumbling. Red watched as another squad marker disappeared from his tactical display. His once proud force of 200 elite troops had been reduced to less than 50, and those who remained were jumping at shadows. Commander, his second-in-command reported, voice trembling, the Spiral Wing contingent has abandoned their posts. They took their ship and left the system. It was the 3rd group to desert in the last day. The aliens were learning a hard lesson. All their advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that could operate without sleep, survive in any environment, and strike from anywhere. The remaining mercenaries had fortified themselves in the colony's main administration building. They had sealed every entrance, placed motion sensors at every corner, and set up overlapping fields of fire. None of it mattered. The humans simply moved through spaces that the aliens didn't even recognize as passages. In the ventilation system above the mercenaries' command center, Hayes and two of his phantoms watched through thermal imaging. The alien leaders were arguing, their different species' body heat creating a colorful display on the sensors. Fear had done its work. The mercenary coalition was falling apart. "Look at their gear," one of the phantoms whispered, his voice barely a breath. The aliens' expensive armor was showing signs of wear. The acid rain had corroded joints and seals, the constant tension had drained power cells, and the lack of proper maintenance was causing systems to fail. The mercenaries had expected a quick raid, not a prolonged engagement against an enemy that never seemed to tire. Red's crystalline form showed stress fractures as he tried to coordinate his remaining forces. The humans had turned everything against them: the environment, the infrastructure, even time itself. His troops hadn't slept properly in days, while the humans showed no signs of fatigue. They struck with the same lethal precision now as they had on the first night. "They're not normal," a mercenary soldier muttered, his four hands shaking as he checked his weapon again. "No species can fight like this. No species can survive like this." Others nodded in agreement. They had all seen the impossible things the humans could do, moving through toxic environments without protection, operating in total darkness, enduring conditions that would kill most species. A soft thud made every alien in the room freeze. They looked up at the ceiling panels, weapons raised. Silence. Then another sound from a different direction. The mercenaries' formations began to break as each soldier turned to face a different shadow. "Hold position," Red commanded, but his voice cracked. Even he couldn't hide his fear anymore. The humans had systematically destroyed not just their forces, but their confidence. Every shadow might hide a phantom. Every sound could be the last thing they heard. In the darkness outside, the rest of Hayes' team moved into position. They had spent days mapping every weakness in the aliens' defenses, every gap in their security. Now it was time to end this. The first sign of attack came when the building's environmental systems suddenly shifted. Temperatures dropped rapidly in some sections while rising in others. Atmospheric pressure changed between rooms, creating dizzying effects on the aliens' sense of balance. The humans, with their adaptable biology, moved through these conditions without effort. "They're in the walls," someone screamed as panels began to move on their own. The mercenaries' formation collapsed completely as each soldier tried to cover every direction at once. Their advanced sensors, confused by the environmental changes, showed threats everywhere and nowhere. Red watched his tactical display dissolve into chaos. His troops were breaking, their discipline shattered by an enemy they couldn't fight in ways they couldn't understand. As darkness fell again outside, he finally accepted the truth. They weren't fighting soldiers. They were being hunted by the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The phantoms prepared for their final assault. The mercenaries were about to learn why humans had not just survived, but thrived on the deadliest planet known to galactic civilization. The colony's weather changed again, bringing freezing temperatures that coated everything in layers of ice. Inside the administration building, the remaining mercenaries huddled together, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Their environmental systems, already strained from days of constant use, struggled to cope with the extreme conditions. Red stood at his command console, watching the last functioning sensors show impossible readings. The humans were moving through the frozen exterior without protection, their bodies somehow adapting to temperatures that would kill most species. Every time the mercenaries thought they understood the limits of human endurance, the Deathworlders proved them wrong. Third level just went dark. A soldier reported, his voice shaking from more than just the cold. "We've lost contact with everyone down there." Red didn't respond. He knew what that meant. The phantoms were moving up through the building, level by level, clearing out his forces with terrifying efficiency. Hayes and his team had split into small units, each taking a different approach to the final assault. Some moved through the frozen ventilation systems, others used the maintenance tunnels, and a few simply walked through the front door, their bodies protected by nothing more than their basic suits and their natural resistance to extreme conditions. "How are they still fighting?" an alien officer asked, his mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "It's been 5 days. No species can maintain combat operations this long without rest." But the humans showed no signs of stopping. If anything, they seemed to be getting more efficient, more deadly, as they learned their enemies' weaknesses. A loud crack echoed through the building as ice formed in the structural joints. The aliens flinched at every sound, their nerves frayed by days of constant tension. They had tried using stimulants to stay alert, but their bodies were reaching their limits. The humans, evolved on a world that demanded constant adaptation, just kept coming. "Commander," Hayes's voice came through every speaker in the building, calm and steady. "Your position is surrounded. Your forces are depleted. Your ships have either been disabled or have abandoned you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic law." Red looked at his remaining troops, barely 30 soldiers from what had been an elite mercenary force. Their advanced armor was failing, their weapons were low on power, and their spirits were broken. They had come expecting to raid a primitive colony. Instead, they had found themselves facing the most lethal hunters in known space. "Perhaps," Red's second-in-command suggested, his crystalline form showing deep stress patterns, "we should consider the humans' offer." Others nodded in agreement. They had all seen too many comrades disappear into the darkness, taken by an enemy they could barely comprehend. Outside the building, the phantoms waited patiently. The freezing temperature meant nothing to them. Their ancestors had survived ice ages and burning deserts. The darkness was their ally, their bodies naturally adapted to hunting in low light. Even fatigue couldn't stop them. Human endurance, evolved over millions of years of constant survival challenges, let them operate long past the limits of other species. "What happens if we refuse?" Red asked through the communication system, his voice betraying his fear. "Then we come in and get you," Hayes replied simply. "We've already mapped every room, noted every weakness in your defenses, and prepared multiple assault routes. Your sensors can't track us. Your armor can't stop us, and your troops can't fight what they can't see or understand." The mercenaries looked at each other, their various alien physiologies all showing signs of defeat. They had faced the impossible, an enemy that didn't just fight them but hunted them, that didn't just survive but thrived in conditions that should have been lethal, that moved like ghosts and struck like demons. Red looked at his tactical display one last time, watching as another section of the building went dark. The humans were already inside, moving through spaces his sensors couldn't penetrate, adapting to conditions his troops couldn't survive. He had finally understood why humans were classified as Deathworlders, not because their planet was deadly, but because they themselves were the apex predators of the galaxy. News spread quickly through the galactic mercenary networks. In dimly lit bars and crowded space stations, survivors of the Horizon Colony raid shared their stories in hushed voices. Their tales seemed impossible. Humans who moved without sound, who survived in deadly conditions, who hunted their prey with terrifying patience and precision. Red sat in a holding cell aboard an Earth military vessel, his crystalline form dulled by the experience. The human interrogator across from him recorded his statement as he described the systematic dismantling of his mercenary force. "We never stood a chance," Red admitted, his voice hollow. "Our intelligence said humans were primitives who relied on basic technology. Nobody told us they were apex predators who had evolved on the deadliest known world in the galaxy." Across different sectors, the surviving mercenaries who had deserted during the battle spread their own warnings. They spoke of humans who could see in darkness, who didn't need sleep for days, who could endure conditions that would kill most species. Their stories painted a picture not of soldiers, but of something far more frightening: predators who had mastered the art of warfare. In the Galactic Mercenary Guild's central database, a new warning was added to all contracts involving human space. Extreme caution advised. Human Special Forces units possess capabilities beyond standard combat parameters. Automatic mission failure probability if encountered. Commander Hayes submitted his final report to Earth Command. The Phantoms had suffered no casualties during the entire operation. They had neutralized an enemy force 4 times their size, rescued the colony, and created a legend that would protect human space better than any fleet. The interesting thing, Hayes noted in his report, was that we didn't need to use any advanced technology. Everything we did was based on natural human capabilities. Our endurance, our adaptability, our ability to operate in extreme conditions. The aliens' greatest weakness was their inability to understand what they were really facing. In the rebuilt Horizon colony, Captain Stone walked through the streets with Hayes, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The colonists had already returned to their homes, their confidence in human protection restored. "You know," Stone said, looking at the administration building where the final surrender had taken place, "they're already telling stories about what happened here. The aliens can't believe that their advanced technology was defeated by what they considered primitive Deathworlders." Hayes smiled slightly. That's the point they missed. Humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth because we had the best technology. We made it because we could adapt to any challenge, survive any condition, and overcome any obstacle. We're not just soldiers. We're the product of millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill us every day. The story of Horizon Colony became required study at every mercenary training facility in the galaxy. They analyzed how a small human special forces team had systematically destroyed an elite mercenary force. The conclusion was always the same: fighting humans, especially their special forces, was a losing proposition. In the following months, piracy and raiding along human borders dropped to zero. The mere rumor of human special forces in an area was enough to send raiders running. The legend grew with each retelling. Humans who could appear from nowhere, who hunted in complete darkness, who never tired and never gave up. Red's final statement to the Galactic Mercenary Guild became famous throughout the community. "We thought we were raiding a primitive colony. Instead, we found ourselves being hunted by the most dangerous predators in known space. If you value your life, stay away from human territory. Their special forces aren't just soldiers. They're the apex predators of a death world, and they will never stop until their hunt is complete." The message was clear. The galaxy had learned a vital lesson. Humans weren't just another spacefaring species. They were Deathworlders, natural hunters, and their special forces were the elite of the elite. The mercenaries' defeat at Horizon Colony had established a new truth in galactic warfare. When humans hunt, the hunters become the hunted.